Hello, everyone. This is Dawn. I'm ASQ Toronto Section Secretary. I will be the moderator of this webinar. On behalf of ASQ Toronto Section, I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar and invite you to join us for online learning opportunities by ASQ Toronto Section free webinars. This webinar is recorded and recording will be available at ASQ Toronto website. Please note that after the webinar session, there will be 5 to 10 minutes time for questions and answers. You can write your questions in the Q&A section of the WebEx tool during the webinar session. You will be given 0.1 RU recertification unit for attending this webinar if you attend 40 minutes or more and also complete the survey. The survey will be sent to you after the webinar session. After completing the survey, you receive a separate email and you can claim your credits by saving this email in PDF format as a proof for ASQ credit claim. Also, I'd like to invite you all for ASQ Toronto upcoming event on April 18, the Spring Seminar 2018. The topic will be Risk Management Principles. You can find out more information and details about this event on ASQ Toronto website. Please join our ASQ Toronto Section 402 LinkedIn group. Visit our website, asqtoronto.org. Feel free to contact us for any questions and queries you might have. Send us email to chair@asqtoronto.org. Now, I'd like to welcome our presenter, Dr. Chaitanya Baliga. Thank you, Dr. Chaitanya Baliga, for accepting to be our presenter. The topic of this webinar is Value of Integrating Risk Management into Existing Quality Systems. Risk management is an essential business activity for enterprises of all sizes. Dr. Chaitanya Baliga serves as Chair-elect of ASQ Section 402 Toronto and Vice Chair of Social Responsibility Technical Committee. He has over 20 years of experience in implementing and executing risk management processes for medical devices, pharmaceuticals, consumer products, and logistics. Now I hand over to our presenter, Dr. Chaitanya Baliga.
Thank you, Dawn, for the wonderful introduction, and good evening to all our attendees. This presentation is basically information, and it is intended for understanding what the risk management processes are, and it is the sole opinion expressed by me as a presenter. Risk management has been a very hot topic recently in terms of regulatory requirements, in terms of new standards like ISO 9001 and other environmental standards. If you look at the World Economic Forum report on Global Risk Report on 2017, you'll notice there is a lot of risk in globally which are interconnected, and this impacts our business. Whether it is small business or large business, we are impacted by this. This webinar will help you to understand how do we manage our risk within our organization and how do we manage understanding the consequence of issues associated with the changes in the world and the global environment. The key thing you will notice over here, there is the impact and likelihood which we use in our risk management, and this particular report also talks about cyber attacks, terrorist attacks, and you'll notice that the impact is high and also the likelihood is quite high. And in the recent Facebook cyber attacks and other attacks are really impacting our data integrity and data privacy of our our organization. Other than that, we are also impacted by raw materials and our process controls, and even the stakeholders engaged in using our processes or finished goods. We'd like to break this into 4 types of risk, namely strategic risk, operational risk, financial risk, and hazard risk. We are quite familiar with operational and hazard risk in our day-to-day activities. As a quality professionals, we are in some cases at a higher management level might be engaged in a strategic risk implementation, especially in the areas of disruptive technology, information technology in terms of cybersecurity, or changes in regulations and customer satisfaction. At the same time, on day-to-day issues, we manage our operational risk through our ISO 9000 standard or ISO 13485 standards and other similar standards on environmental standards like 44501 for hazards associated with occupational and health and safety. I like the presentation by Mark Jablonski, who really related operational risk and strategic risk in a way to link operational risk with statistical risk. The reason why is that we can perceive the risk in our day-to-day operation in terms of probability of occurrence and the severity of the risk. And this is quite visual, and we can determine statistically what's the probability of the occurrence. But for catastrophic risk, like a terrorist attack or an earthquake or any other kind of changes like disruptive technology that might impact our business, are really determined as low probability, but the consequences are high. And this is based on our strategic risk. If I look at a Swiss cheese model, which is an operational risk, I would look into an ideal control environment where we have these pieces of cheese which has got no holes in it, and these are basically, we've got good defenses. If I use this cheese as an example, these defenses can be perforated by these holes. That's the real environment. For example, if there is an organizational influence has failed, or the supervision has failed, or the preconditions or your processes are failed, then we land up with an unsafe activity. For example, a plane crash or an operational activity where we have recently seen the defenses of our cyber world or internet has been impacted through data infringement. These are all latent failures which land up into this mishap. The reason why is that the risk is usually connected between an issue and an assumption. So we have uncertainty or knowledge of our ability to understand what's happening in the next in a different situation. If you look at the activities of failures in our organizational system, these systems can be impacted from our quality management system if we have inadequate processes, or we have operational pressures or inadequate informations. These are all holes in our defenses. And in the end, what happens is these lead to an active failure. we have to remember that these holes do exist in all our systems. The risk of failure at each level of defense can be mitigated by developing effective defenses. So we have a better escalation process or better identification of risk process. The successive layers throughout our processes should be designed in such a way that we can really capture these failures well in advance before it goes into a customer hands or the users or any other stakeholders within our process control. This defense control can only minimize or mitigate occurrences of huge failures or business loss. When we talk about these kind of risk events, we usually talk about a total failure across these holes. And that's the reason why we land up with poor management or flawed systems or weak controls leading to an active failure. But if you have a good defense system, then it might be reflected back and it can be captured. And as a quality professional, we usually capture this as a non-conformance report or another kind of a systemic management where you are able to control it, or improving or updating our failure mode effect analysis charts or control charts. These are the ways we manage and control these risk events. The key thing when we look at risk to quality, we always focus on probability and severity. When we use FMEA, we try to use a detection element in it to give a three-dimensional element to it. But most of the risk management standards, they usually focus on probability and severity and talk about harm to the users or the patients in case of pharmaceuticals or medical devices. Or in an other kind of environment, we would call it as loss of quality. And these attributes, these quality attributes, basically talk to failure to meet the needs or expectation of the client or the user. And the probability or the severity is really driven by the adverse impact on the quality attributes. So that's how we define harm. And then what we do is we put them in a risk matrix in terms of probability of occurrence versus the increasing severity of harm or consequence. And this risk matrix is the one which is used by the process in a way that it drives our regular management of our quality management system. But the key thing is 80 to 90% of our time we never go back to review our risk management files. The key thing is that the risk scenarios which we are managing is through potential threat or failures and system defects, which really gives rise to a hazard, and this hazard has to be managed. So how do we do that? We usually focus on the user harm or the product quality or business loss or interpretation or its image. The risk management evolution, if we really focus on how these things have evaluated or evolved over a period of time, initially it was very transactional. The risk is bad, and we focused on transferring the risk. In an integrated risk management system, the risk is an expense. So we focused on managing risk and how do we manage control. So we use FMEA or control plans. So that's how we use those kind of tools to ensure that there is an integrated risk management. But in the current world, it is more strategic because it's becoming more global. Our organizations have become global and we are impacted by global regulations changes or any other changes associated within the industry. The risk is now uncertainty. This focus is on optimization, decision making, and ability to respond and recover. So if I look at the traditional risk management, we are addressing everything separately, and safety and emergency is managed by health and safety in a separate organization, and compliance issues are addressed in a separate silo approach. And most of the agreements are based on whether you have an insurance to cover that risk. In advanced risk management system, that's like in strategic or integrated kind of risk management system, we are more proactive and we prevent by reducing the risk. This integrates all our quality management system or environmental management system and even the safety management and other management system. And we ensure that risk transfer techniques is really understood and the insurance policies are really understood in terms of having a business continuity model associated with that. So initially, to reiterate, the transactional one has been focused on the product, assets, and balance sheets, followed by the integrated quality risk management through protecting organizations' mission and vision. And finally, in strategic, what we are doing is we are creating and protecting the value throughout the organization. That means each level, each function, and each entity within that organization is trained and understands what risk is and how we manage risk at that entity level or at the process level. Usually we are bogged down by uncertainty, and that's because of lack of or inadequate knowledge. And that's why when we are trying to understand in the risk model of probability and severity, we are a little stuck because we don't have the adequate knowledge. We then determine whether it's going to cause, based on the scenarios we discussed, that it may cause harm or it may not cause harm. And then what we do is we take the hazard which is likely to cause harm, and then we manage that risk in relation to probability and severity. But we are really engaged with so many of our standards associated with the risk management. I do not know whether you're aware of ISO 3100 risk management, which has been recently adopted by all the countries and globally. And this standard really links through and provides what you call as the framework to risk management system. And I'm going to little focus on that to give you a better perspective of what that framework looks like. The terminologies are captured in ISO Guideline 73 and ISO Guideline 14050, and the requirements are captured in ISO 45001 for health and safety, 9001 for regular standards, and 14001 for environmental. As we go down, there are a couple of guidelines like OSHA's or 27001 for cyber security, and further down we see that there are tools available such as how do we manage FTA or FMEAs or any other risk management tools, and these are captured in those particular standards below. And what you see at the bottom is the risk, safety, quality, technology, and environmental. These all have got their own management system, and these management systems are really, if they are integrated properly, we can manage the risk management across the board. I've just given you other standards, requirements, and guidelines and tools which are available for different sectors. WHO has got for HACCP, GMP, GAMP standards are available for electronic records and signatures. 14971 is for application of risk management to medical devices, and ICH-Q9 is available as the quality risk management Q9 for the pharma industry. I want to share something with you with the current standard of ISO 3100. They are focused on the principles, the framework, and the processes. And these principles, if they are really integrated in your quality management system, this will really help you to really integrate all the processes and all the functions to ensure that you have a totally integrated enterprise level risk management. Let us look at the 8 principles associated with this standard. The integrated statement in one of the principles is basically that all activities should be integrated with some sort of risk associated in your process, or how do you manage risk within the process. You establish a structured and comprehensive approach. You customize as per your organizational context and linking into your objectives, your mission and vision, and so that it really fits into your organization and day-to-day work. It should be inclusive of all stakeholders, including your person who provides input, your raw materials, as well as people who are processing within your organization, and finally your users or other customers, so that you really understand the knowledge and perceptions from across the board. And being dynamic, this is key element. What it says is basically your risk management file or risk management process needs to be very dynamic in terms of all the changes, internal or external changes that impact your risk, and it should be able to detect and respond and work on the best available information. As quality professionals, we are always focused on fact-based. So any account where there's limitations and uncertainties regarding the historical data or the current information or future expectation, then we need to be engaged with what's happening around you. And finally, the human factor and cultural influence. That has got a lot of influence. Even though you can have the best quality management system, if human behavior and culture is not integrated, then in your risk management process, then just like the cheese model, you need to understand where are your holes in your human behavior. And finally, it is a continual improvement. That means the risk management has to be continuously improved. You need to go back and be dynamic, look into your risk management files and work. The key thing in this standard says that integration of your risk management, how you do it, what is your design in managing your risk in terms of reporting, how do you implement it, how do you really evaluate your risk, and what are your improvement stages, how do you phase it so that you can integrate slowly all the management systems in your organization. This is how it looks, usually a risk management process. You have the scope, you've got a risk assessment, risk identification, risk analysis, risk evaluation. This is something which we do day to day. We have a monitoring and reviewing process. We have a communication and consultation process which is engaged within the organization. It should not be one department just managing the risk and giving the risk management numbers or RPN numbers in FMEA, because that has got no value unless all stakeholders are really integrated, and that's what the standard 3100 is looking forward, or the intended use is for that. The risk treatment and recording and reporting is also crucial, and it's basically, this is how it is integrated even in ISO 14997 for medical devices or the ICH 9 for pharma industry. So we have the same kind of communication, the same kind of risk management tools associated, and how we manage it. But the key thing is, what is your culture in your organization in terms of risk appetite, and how do you want to manage? The risk appetite is basically the amount of risk an entity is willing to accept or pursue the value. That means, what is my risk in terms of dollar value? We are going to really manage it. So it's like going to any organization where you want to find out that if I fail in a certain manner, what is the impact on recall or impact on your brand value. So these are the impacts can be quantified and can be related to your risk tolerance, and these ranges can give you an idea whether you're risk aggressive, you're risk neutral, or risk averse. So if your appetite is different, these ranges or tolerance levels can be more or less depending on how you want, what your culture is. If you look at our quality management system, we usually have quality planning, quality assurance, quality control, and quality improvement. In quality planning, it's very much systemic and process approach, and you are managing through management review and resource management process. And this is very proactive. So that's what ISO 3100 is looking forward. How do you design your risk throughout your organization? How do you design your risk management or resource management? Quality assurance is a proactive upstream approach. You use audit, supplier evaluation, document management, and training. This ensures that your risk is contained and it is really looked into. Quality control is downstream. By sampling and by inspection, it's very reactive. So what's happening is it is the third layer or fourth layer of defense. As in the Swiss model, if everything fails, then you are at least at quality control, you may be able to capture it. Then you have what you call as the improvement system or effectiveness, where the continuous improvement or non-conformance management, feedback, or regulatory compliance issues is the last defense, which falls into what you call as an active failure. So this active failure should reinforce your risk management files or FMEAs or any other tools you use to ensure that this doesn't happen. And this is how an integrated by integrating risk management into quality management system, what you are doing is that you are taking your internal data, you're taking your external data, and you're doing a compliance planning. And then you're putting it into continuous improvement, you're strengthening your quality assurance. And if you see there is a bigger risk, then it has to go into a business project or development or solutions to ensure that that risk is mitigated before it is onto the market. A management review process is the one which drives to update your risk repository. That means what are your potential risks globally or internally or externally that impacts your external data or your internal data source. Now if I look at it, nowadays we have big data, that's your value. That value should be used to reduce risk by predictive analytics. So you might use the data from your ERP systems or any other systems or other other electronic data systems where you collect all this data to ensure that we can reduce this risk. Now if I look at the risk levels, whenever it is operational risk or strategic risk, we can really improve this kind of risk. From strategic perspective, we can use quality systems, and operationals where we have product and process development. By using risk management principles, framework, and process, you can really mitigate these risks at a lower level through continuous improvement process. When you identify the risk, you have only 4 responses. You either accept it to monitor it, you avoid it by eliminating it or getting out of the situation, reducing it by putting some controls, or sharing it with a partner via insurance policy or some kind of an agreement. So you share who is responsible for what. And what you're doing is you're creating a residual risk, which means you are just you're shrinking that risk level. Now, if I compare the impact versus probability. That means the probability of occurrence versus the severity of or the impact to the business. If I put those elements, what we accept, control, or mitigate and control or share the risk, then we can use the risk matrix in this manner. If it is low risk, we accept it and we move on. At that point, we just monitor it. When you have a medium risk, you have two areas. One is either high probability of occurrence. At that time, you use control mechanism. You have more inspections. That actually increases your cost. But if you cannot, if it's a low probability, then you can have, but there is a medium risk to it, then you should share it, like in terms of business continuity plans or having some kind of other agreements such that you reduce that risk at a certain level or mitigate that risk under that situation if the impact is very high. Now, if the risk is quite high in that risk matrix, then you need to have a real mitigation plan to change the way you do the process and apply control mechanism within that process. Now, the second element, which is very important, is to communicate. Most of our organizations do not communicate or have a dashboard of risk or related responses. This visual status of key risk stands relative to the risk tolerance. That means, are we able to tolerate this risk? And that drives your culture, whether we are risk averse or you're going to be more risk-taking organization. Flow charts of processes with key controls need to be noted, need to be identified, need to monitor to ensure that these controls are managed properly. Narratives of business objectives linked to operational risk and responses. You have strategic plans in your organization and strategic objectives. You need to see whether those objectives have got residual risk or they might impact your stakeholders or internally or externally. List all the key risks that needs to be monitored or used for planning new solutions. And the management has to have an understanding of these key risks and take the responsibility and communicate these and assign it to the people who are responsible at the functional levels and through the integrated management systems. What are the issues in industries? Hiding risk, not understanding the consequences, and also the culture. And inadequate investigation report. When we investigate our non-conformance reports, we are not really managing the risk through that process. Applying rationales for removing industry's obligations to comply with regulatory requirements. And this is very important, especially in cybersecurity areas where we recently saw what's happening with Facebook. And these rationales have to be understood and really put forward so that the customers are not impacted, or even our internal customers are not impacted. What are the opportunities for these industries? Even though all these risks are getting more regulated in the industry or needs to be integrated in our industry, we need to facilitate common approach to risk management in all processes, whether you do health and safety or you do regular processes or you're managing customers or you're managing data through a virtual environment. Support science-based decision making. That means it is fact-based. You need to have correct data to really make decisions on your risk opportunities or whether we need to have risk aversion policy or we need to have a very stringent risk tolerance requirements. Focus the risk on users. And finally, avoid restrictive and unnecessary requirements. We have a tendency to use old legacy processes and integrate it into our current processes, which are much more digital or much more risk controlled, but we have the same policies into these new processes. We need to really understand those requirements and facilitate communication and transparency across the board when you talk about risk. It is not a tick box approach that yes, we have a procedure, but is this systemic risk-based thinking across the board, across your organization? It's not an audit tick box. Okay, we have a procedure, thank you, and nothing is moving ahead when your risk management file is static and is not dynamically changed over a period of time. Thoughts for the future. We as a company, we need to really understand the simplest strategies that can be embedded in our day-to-day operations. So you can have risk levels associated with your supplier management. You can have a high-risk supplier, medium-risk supplier, low-risk supplier, or your non-conformance can be divided into whether it's a major risk or a critical risk or a minor risk, or even associate with if you are doing software development. What is the risk if the testing is not successful? So these are the elements needs to be embedded in your processes. And this, by doing that, you're really engaging people, process, and infrastructure, and the compliance requirements are connected within the organization. Now, where's the value? The biggest value lays in the promotion of continuous improvement mentality and diligent management practices and ongoing monitoring. So the organization is automatically tuned in terms of reducing potential future losses by monitoring and reporting and understanding the risk, by identifying and providing immediate responses, and the decisions are very much risk-based rather than based on what a person feels, not considering what's the risks to the organization or risk to the user. So the risk-based decision becomes quite important as we go along. What is the value of the risk management? The value, end of the day, to an organization or as an individual who manages the quality management system is that it achieves a higher level of efficiency, flexibility, and transparency. It links the organizational performance. It provides an understanding where are the potential risks, because you are looking at your process workflow or your FMEAs or your FTAs and really understanding where there might be potential risk if one activity is not done in a typical way, and if it is done in an atypical way, what are the chances that a user can lead into a use error. And in medical devices, they call it as human factors that impact the patient and the service provider. Or the key element is that you're involving a crucial decision making through this risk management or risk assessment process. And end of the day, there is an awareness across the board on what risk is, and automatically it gets incorporated into your culture. And finally, when you measure this continuously to facilitate your risk detection abilities and updating your process with relevant actions to mitigate new risk, this really ensures that your organization is efficient, flexible, and also transparent. And ISO 3100 really emphasizes that this is the way we should work. Now, the key thing is, I just want to keep you calm and acknowledge uncertainty in the processes you have, manage your risk, and I'll leave it to the audience to ask questions at this point. I think we have enough time for a question and answer session. Don, if you have any questions from the...
Thank you very much again, Dr. Chantania Bariga, for your presentation. There will be 5 to 10 minutes time for questions and answers. You can write your questions in the Q&A section of the WebEx tool. And I can see we have some questions that have been posted. First question was about, based on ISO 9001, we need to address issues, meaning we need to exploit opportunities. Do you verify we have to undergo the same process while treating the opportunities?
Yeah, when you look at the opportunities in your process, you need to understand the example what I had given on the Swiss cheese model. Where are the holes? And these holes are basically your opportunities. So if you have a process which is slightly deficient through your either deviation process or non-conformance process, and if you identify your non-conformance process with risk levels, like if it's a critical risk, major risk, or minor risk, then by relating those root causes associated with that, you can really get back to use that as an opportunity to improve your processes and develop and improve your risk mitigation process. I hope that addresses your question.
Thank you. There is another question that has been posted. Is there any table for risk appetite level categorized per industry?
There is no table as such. There are some articles written in financial risk magazines and presentations. I can the one which I had presented over here, it's got a source below that which talks about where the risk appetite comes from. So it is right now, I think the credit risk and financial organization use that a lot. If you reference any financial risk handbooks, you should be able to see those.
Thank you, Chantanya. Another question that has been posted is, can FMEA tool used for risk calculations for strategy management? FMEA tool factor states P probability, S severity, D detection. How detection applied of a strategic management system should be, and what tools can be used?
In a strategic risk, I mean, I would go into and look into the first slide I had shown about from the World Economic Review report. It has given a very nice probability and risk in terms of what are the areas in which country, what are the issues we have in terms of cyber security or data or other impacts on disaster in different regions. They're using detection is very much used on an FMEA kind of a platform where you're relating to a product, but in strategy it is more on a business level. So the risk calculation is very much linked to the probability and severity of the impact. And that is why I've shown that graph, which is the iceberg model, where the catastrophic risk is very, very low probability. So naturally, the detection level would be quite low comparative to the statistical level, which is on the operational calculation. So if you have an opportunity to go through the book by Mark Zablonsky, you might have a good chance to understand the strategic risk approach.
Thank you. There is another question that is posted, and what you like to suggest to educate or train the CEO about risk and risk management?
I think the risk management approach to a CEO should be done in terms of dollar value. What is the impact? So if you can convert into the cost of quality, and you convert all your cost associated with non-conformity association or the recalls and warranty, and associate at which step in your process that it failed through your non-conformance report, where you have seen your process flow and you have said at this process we have consistent failure. That dollar value should really trigger a CEO to say that yes, we need to really invest on risk management process. This has been across the board. Most of the top management are not engaged, and also the quality professionals never present what is the risk to the organization if this is not done properly, and what is the dollar value associated with that. If you start putting the dollar value associated with this, then we can really associate this with the risk with the risk management to your top management. You know how it is managed. I hope this this addresses it. It is a cultural issue, and you need to really work with the top management and give one example at a time. And I think that's the only way you can explain what is risk. And when you talk to your top management, you need to talk in terms of risk, and that should help you.
Thank you. There are two more questions that have been posted. Are there any techniques for determining how to quantify the severity, occurrence, and detection in FMEA tools?
Is this from which industry is it? Is it in a regulated industry or non-regulated industry? Because in a regulated industry, you have a better understanding by benchmarking what is the probability of occurrence from the historic area. And in a medical device or pharma industry, you can really find out from Freedom of Information or on the on the Ministry of Health database, what are the issues are consistently happening for your type of product. So that gives you an opportunity to look at the number of occurrences in the industry. That's the probability of occurrence. Then in terms of severity, you can really link to what kind of dollar value or fines associated with that particular non-conformity or that particular failure mode. So by understanding that, or the impact can drive your severity based on your levels. You might be having 0 to 5 or 0 to 10 levels. You can associate those numbers to that. Then the detectability is very much dependent on your product, how your product has got ability to really show up, saying that before a person uses, either through a software controls, it shows an error or it does not allow. Does it do a fail-safe or safe-fail mechanism integrated in your product design, So that will give you an idea of what kind of the detection level does that fall. So for each company or each type of each organization's product or service can differ because of this the level of what the D value would be based on your design. So your design FMEA will also provide you a hint or a relationship to that particular process design, process FMEA. So design FMEA and the process FMEA should be linked. What I found in the recent FMEA model in automotive industry, where the German company has come up with, they have a wonderful updated method where they use systems and they use the product as well as process, all three integrated so into your design. So if you use a system like suppose it's a bicycle and you use the system as the chain is your system, then every element, every component, the system will have a risk definition. Then you have each component will have its own risk definition, and then each level or the process for manufacturing that will have its own FMEA. So all these are integrated. So if you can use that model and you can look into that or attend our risk management principles seminar on April 18th at ASQ, you will come across all these tools which will be used for risk management at this conference.
Yes, they mentioned it's from automotive industry.
Yes, automotive has changed its regulations. I forgot the name of the new standard. It's VAD, I think. I'm not sure. The new automotive industry has come up with an updated FMEA model.
Thank you. Another question that is posted in a ISO 9001 establishment project, which approach of risk identification shall we use, top-down or bottom-up?
This is a trick question, right? It's up to, like somebody asked him before, how much does the CEO know about the risk management? If the CEO is very much involved in risk management, then it really will drive from the top that we want that risk management integrated in every processes. I would rather go through system risk, look at your systems, how your process each functions, high level system levels and high level process level, and then look at what are the controls you have using your process flow maps, and focus on the control charts on as you go down and focus on your process flow charts. You will see a lot of diamonds where there's a lot of decision making. Are those decision makings are really providing you or risk mitigation, or it is just giving you a path which does not it transfers the risk into the next process. So that is the key you need to understand. Where is the risk transfer happening, or whether they are accepting, and what is the risk level at that point. But at that point, what is the final impact to your user or to your customer? If you can really understand that, I think you can identify that or identify the risk at that level. But I would rather go from top to bottom. That would be better because you're educating and you're having proper controls and you're engaging everybody from the top management to the person who is engaged on day-to-day work.
Thank you. We have only a few minutes left for question and answers. Another question that has been posted is, can you please provide a list of recommended risk management reference documents, website, books on this topic, such as mentioned ISO 31000?
Yeah, I could share that with you. It is well documented in every location. Maybe I can post this to the ASQ website where you can get all that risk for different industries and what are the regulations associated with that. I will do my best. And maybe give me about a week or so, and maybe associated that document with this presentation.
Another question is about, can you please give us a case study or good risk management example for a high regulated industry to show the risk management process?
Unfortunately, I'm not able to do, because each company it's their own policies. There are different ways where we can manage this through a lot of presentations, through conferences. I do not know which industry you are in, but if you are in automotive industry, there are a lot of case studies are done at conferences where they present these ones, where they redact all the elements of the product. But at high level, yes, we can have another presentation related to that, how FMEAs are managed.
Yes, thank you. The other question is, could you please give us an example of risk management for individual or family other than system or products?
You mean in terms of systems, or what was it? Can you please repeat it?
Could you please give an example of risk management for individuals or family other than system or products?
Okay. Oh, that's very much on the financial risk and credit risk areas, where there is elements of individual behaviors and associated with finance, and there are certain occupational and health and safety, where it's related to health and safety, and the standard is 45001, which has been recently published. And there are also on social responsibility standards which really talk about the individual risk, and they are mostly on the occupational and health and safety. I hope that answers it. Is that the intent was?
I can see one more question. Are there risk management resources available on the ASQ website in a specific location, perhaps?
If you remember, there is what you call as the knowledge section, where if you search risk management, you will get a lot of articles associated in different divisions, because we have about 14 to 20 divisions and forums, and all these forums and divisions have risk management associated, like automotive industry or nuclear energy or medical devices or pharma or food and drug and cosmetics. They have articles associated with that, and if you do that search, you will get lots of articles in that. So there's no really a repository where all those files are there, as far as I know.
Yes, thank you, Chaitanya. I think we have covered all the questions. And I should remind you all that you can find the recording of this presentation at ASQ Toronto section website.
Thank you, Don, and thank you all the attendees. Appreciate attending, and have a wonderful long weekend. Those who are in Canada and US. And good, have a wonderful Easter.
Yes, thank you all for attending this webinar. And if you have more questions, you can send us email. You can send email to chair-elect@asqtoronto.org. We respond you accordingly. Thank you all and enjoy your long weekend.